Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Tuesday, December 9th, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll hear from Variety's Gene Mattis on the opposition in the entertainment industry that has assembled to fight Netflix's proposed acquisition of Warner Brothers and HBO, and Alex Rittman reports on the scene at the Red Sea Film Festival in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Chanel Jones has been named co-host with Jenna Bush Hager of the 10 a.m. hour of The Today Show. My colleague Brian Steinberg has the scoop. Matt Gutman is Bari Weiss's first hire at CBS News. The ABC News alum will be lead correspondent for 48 Hours, and he'll contribute to other CBS News programs, including 60 Minutes. Gutman had been with ABC News since 2008. Jimmy Kimmel has inked a one-year extension of his deal to host Jimmy Kimmel Live for ABC. That's good news, but the one-year term seems notable. The EU has launched an antitrust probe of Google's use of content to train AI models. The investigation will also examine whether Google is violating competition rules by, quote, imposing unfair terms and conditions on publishers and content creators, end quote. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Gene Mattis, Variety's senior media writer, discusses the opposition that is forming in the entertainment industry to block Netflix's acquisition of Warner Brothers and HBO. The $82 billion deal unveiled last week by the streaming giant has different industry constituencies up in arms. There's also concern about the prospect of Paramount Skydance absorbing Warner Brothers and HBO if David Ellison is successful in his counterattack mission. Gene Mattis, thank you for joining me.
Happy to do it.
With David Ellison making his stand to try to pry Warner Brothers and HBO out of the arms of Netflix, the corporate drama never stops. But I wanted to talk to you specifically about the opposition that came together with lightning speed even before the deal was formally announced. There are a bunch of different industry constituencies that are very worked up about the potential of this deal, whether it be to Netflix or Paramount. Unions have had a range of responses to this, from the DGA saying we really need to study this and meet with them, to the Writers Guild of America coming out flat out and declaring that this merger must be blocked. Gene, my question for you is, who out there do you think can put up enough roadblocks or at least elongate the regulatory review process here?
I think obviously President Trump is the number one obstacle to a potential deal. We've seen his ability to get in the middle of these things before. But setting that aside, obviously all the labor groups are very concerned about fewer buyers for their services, bottom line. And they are going to be loud about it. And they are being loud about it in a way that I don't think they have been on a recent merger, certainly not since Disney Fox, and maybe not even with Disney Fox. Given the state of the industry where things have been, honestly, the last 5 years, people are sort of at the end of their rope already. And then this comes along and is just one more thing on top of it. And it just feels like where there's only going to be 2 or 3 places you can take your pitch to anymore. And that is the thing that people are most afraid of, is they just won't have any leverage in these negotiations, and that the old days are basically done and dusted.
If you actually look at the viewing share numbers, of course, YouTube is really the big kahuna and Disney is close behind. But in the public perception numbers, what entity has come and become more of a force and more on everybody's lips than Netflix? In a way, Netflix's success is going to be something they have to overcome here, in the sense that people think that they are just so dominant that this would be an utter monopoly.
We've seen over the last 10, 15 years, streaming has become the inevitable future over that period. And people have a lot of grievances and complaints about that. And we worked through all of that during the 2023 strike. But I think this makes it pretty clear, if it wasn't already, that streaming is here. It is not going anywhere, and it is not the future, it's the present. And the old model is really in the rearview mirror.
One of Netflix's biggest disruptions behind the scenes has been in the compensation protocols for key talent, actors, writers, directors, producers. Hollywood went from a back end business where you really played for back end points, and boy, in success, those points would be an annuity that will support your grandchildren, to an upfront business where in demand talent can get very big upfront checks, but not that back end participation that leads to the kind of annuity that pays off for decades. So there's definitely been a trade off. And that whole shift, which has really taken root over about a decade, it was one of the emotional issues that fueled the strike. If Netflix buys Warner Brothers, is it game over? Is that now just enshrined as that's going to be permanent in the industry? Is that what you're getting as you talk to union people?
Yeah, I mean, is the merger a cause of that or a consequence sort of far downstream? And we've had that debate and we ended up where we ended up. That was what the strike was about. They got a success bonus out of that. It was meant to mimic the old formula of, you get paid in success, but obviously is a pale shadow in a real way. Which is fundamentally the technology of streaming is very, very different from the technology of syndication or broadcast or theatrical or anything else. And so there's no such thing as a rerun anymore. And you don't get paid for each rerun, and that's just a technological development that's been great for consumers and not great for profit participants.
The three major guilds that we've heard from, the Writers Guild of America has come down with block this at all costs. SAG-AFTRA has raised some concerns but hasn't been quite as strenuous. The DGA, in typical DGA fashion, wants to study things and have meetings, which good for them. That's a diplomatic approach. Do you think anybody here has the ability to really throw up significant roadblocks to this deal?
And the Teamsters, we should say, are also against it, and the Producers Guild is also
Oh,
against
yeah.
it. Is a pretty broad community that's opposed at this point. Honestly, I do think they have an opportunity to influence the conversation, and this will be reviewed by the Department of Justice and by the FTC, but also by state attorney generals around the country. And the more noise you can kick up, the more opposition there is, the more political pressure is brought to bear on political leaders around the country, not just in the White House, but attorney generals and that sort of thing. Potentially, they could create real headaches for Netflix on this.
Let me ask you about theater owners. Do you think exhibition, which has been a very challenged sector, do you think they have the pull to really get much attention here? They are saying that if Netflix does this, it will hasten the end of moviegoing.
All the studios have been evolving the windows for some time. And the question is that enough to create an antitrust problem if you have a 2-week window and then put something on the Netflix platform? Like, is that so different really than what's the trend that's already been underway for the last 5-6 years? That one is obviously much more a focus on a Netflix question, and Netflix obviously have also said that they will keep making Warner Brothers movies and keep releasing them theatrically. I feel like there's probably less leverage on that one than there is from the labor perspective.
I know you've talked to some antitrust experts. What are you hearing on the Netflix versus Paramount? What would be worse for the marketplace in terms of that consolidation?
The focus from the antitrust perspective is primarily, at least in the conversation, been about the two streaming services combining. So you have, depending on how you look at it, either the number one or the number two streaming service combining with another very significant streaming service in HBO Max. And that's, a classic horizontal merger that, depending on how you look at the numbers, could be getting up into this threshold of 30% is a very important threshold in antitrust. And if you start to claim that amount of market share, it sort of becomes presumptively anti-competitive. And that's when people really start to take a very serious look at it. Now, obviously, Netflix has an argument that, if you count everything that anybody watches, including, looking at their phone and TikTok, then it's a much smaller percentage of the total market. But I think the narrower you examine it, the SVOD marketplace, the greater share that the combined Netflix HBO is going to have, certainly compared to any of its competitors. And so that's the most obvious antitrust concern. But from a labor standpoint, they don't want either of these deals. Honestly, they would want Warner Brothers to continue to be an independent company. And so it's just a question of, is that really a realistic option at this point. But there's a whole political component to this as well. And are you in Donald Trump's good graces or not is a whole other factor that has to be analyzed realistically.
Let me ask you, for political figures not named Trump, is there anybody out there that you think could also be a real thorn in their side beyond just issuing statements?
We saw Elizabeth Warren. Obviously, she was going to be against it no matter what. But you also saw Mike Lee, who's a Republican from Utah, somebody like Josh Hawley. There's a whole wing of the Republican Party that is very skeptical of big tech, just big companies in general. But there's definitely a bipartisan sense of concern about this sort of thing.
I think the only certainty is that there will be more political theater around this to come, both in Washington, in Hollywood. Gene, thank you for rolling up your sleeves. Really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks. Happy to do it.
And now we turn to Alex Rittman, Variety's London bureau chief. He's in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia to cover the Red Sea Film Festival. We talk about the scene at this budding event that has had resources poured into it by the Saudi kingdom. We talk about why that is and why the country is looking to build up its media and arts sector. And we talk about how all of that inevitably collides with the traditional tensions between Western culture and attitudes and those of the kingdom, as we've seen in protests and backlash that has emerged to talent who participated in the Riyadh Comedy Festival just a few weeks ago. Alex Rittman, our London bureau chief, joining me from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. How are you doing there at the Red Sea International Film Festival?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Cynthia. It's genuinely been very impressive.
Well, Alex, I know you are a veteran of this event, so we can really get some perspective from you. But tell me what's been the talk of the town this year. Obviously, there's a whole lot going on in the entertainment business. Curious what folks that are attending there are buzzing about.
As you said, it's only 5 years old. I think it's the biggest the festival's been so far. It's big, it's buzzy, there's plenty of things going on, plenty of films being shown, lots and lots of people here, a very steady stream of big name talent, a lot of Hollywood names that have been coming through. There's a huge cultural centre that is now home to the premieres and the opening night party.
Sketch the scene for us. Give us a sense of how it plays out over the 4 days.
So there's this huge area called Cultural Square and this vast cinema complex that's been built there, but it's not like your steel and glass glittering affair. It's very much in tune with local Arabic style. The first 2 years I was here, everything was being held in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, was this exceptionally shiny and glitzy and slightly overbearing venue. But now it's in its own purpose-built location. There's a huge auditorium for the main premieres, but also lots of other screens, and they're having screenings throughout the day into the evening. There's a huge area for the red carpet. Yeah, I mean, look, this is what you can achieve when you have a lot of money at your disposal.
Is there any kind of marketplace involved? Is there any buying and selling going on?
Yeah, there is. They have a huge area called the Souk, which is a short buggy ride away from the cultural centre, or a walk. It can get a bit sweaty in the day if you want to risk that. But that's also absolutely huge. And that's where they've got the press conferences and the talks and conversations. That's where Variety, we've got our studio, so people are coming through there. But there's lots of local companies, lots of international companies that are coming through. I hear lots of execs from the US have come over. I know Netflix and Disney have sent people in to town. So yeah, that's another side to it.
You mentioned, of course, this is what you can do when you have a lot of money, and certainly the kingdom, the Saudi kingdom, has very vocally and demonstrably been pouring money into building arts and culture and media. They've been very explicit as part of this larger Saudi 2030 vision, very explicit about saying that they feel like they need a stronger cultural and media sector as part of their larger emergence on the world stage. Part and parcel of that is an opening of a society that had been much more conservative and, from a Western perspective, very discriminatory. And that really, within the blink of an eye, since 2017, 2018, there's been a great opening of this society. And so when you're there, do you literally feel the winds of change around you?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's not forget, cinemas only reopened here in, when was it, 2018. So we're 7 years on from that. So the change has been phenomenal. And it's not just me being a cynic, but you could suggest that this is a very expensive culture washing event. And that's an elephant in the room that you perhaps don't ignore. But at the same time, there's this huge creative scene here that previously was just under the surface. And now they've been given this huge platform to come into their own. Just last night, we had the local premiere of this film, Desert Warrior, which is the most expensive Saudi film, ever made. I think it was like $150 million, the biggest film to ever shoot solely in Saudi Arabia. That's a real statement of intent.
Let me ask you about the setting, because Jeddah, as I understand, is considered like the Miami Beach of Saudi Arabia.
It's by the Red Sea. Okay, went last year to go around the Al Balad, which is like the historic old town. They've restored these buildings, which are like, some of them I hear are like 800, 900 years old. And it's absolutely delightful. You can just walk around at night and there's little cafes here. And it's a really charming, chilled vibe, little people just sitting, having a cup of coffee. It's predominantly local. I think Jeddah's always been considered like the cultural capital of Saudi Arabia. Perhaps it was chosen for the festival because it's considered a little more liberal than some of the more conservative areas. It's always had a strong art foundation here.
Interesting. Tell us about some of the names that have been coming through the Variety Studio.
We had Vin Diesel, Michael Caine, Juliette Binoche, there was Uma Thurman, Ana de Armas, Jessica Alba, Dakota Johnson, Sean Baker, who's heading up the jury here, Naomi Harris, Kirsten Dunst, Aishwarya Rai, Daniel Kaluuya was in town. Apparently yesterday he gave a discussion to up-and-coming filmmakers behind closed doors. There was no press there. They weren't shouting about it. So there is lots going on behind the scenes that they aren't kind of making a big deal about, which is nice to hear. And Adrian Brody swung by the festival yesterday.
For the festival itself, that there's a real emphasis on women, female filmmakers telling female stories. And I'm going to sound like a broken record on the film festival stage as they're up there talking and as filmmakers are talking. How do they balance this showcase with the historic restrictions on women, what women could do in public, what they could wear, could they drive? It's such a dramatic change. I can't imagine, just even within Saudi culture, how people are dealing with it, how women are responding to the opportunity.
They all seem absolutely overjoyed that this film festival is on, from what it seems. They focus very much on the future. I think right from the start, there's been this focus on female filmmakers, and I think that was very purposeful. And when you think about some of the most groundbreaking Saudi filmmakers, it's names like Haifa al-Mansour, who made her film Wajda before cinemas could open up. And I remember speaking to her at the time, and she had to shoot the film from the back of a van because she couldn't be on the street with men at the time. And that was 15 years ago, and now that just seems like centuries ago. But this year with Uma Thurman, Ana de Armas, Juliette Binoche, and this is the first year that Caring has brought its Women in Motion initiative. And they had a big gala event the other night and a panel discussion. I think that it really does seem like they've put that is the central platform.
Alex, thank you for being Variety's eyes and ears in far-flung places in the world.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, Cynthia.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. The Film Independent Spirit Awards will be held February 15th at the Hollywood Palladium. Ego Wodim will host. Don't miss our TikTok on Paramount's spurned courtship of Warner Brothers Discovery back in September and October. It's full of color about the habits and practices of moguls and billionaires. My colleague Todd Spangler has the story up on Variety.com right now. We love to hear from our listeners, so please send thoughts, gripes, and other feedback about Daily Variety to podcasts@Variety.com. Before we go, congrats to pop group Cat's Eye. They've been named Global Artist of the Year by TikTok. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Gene Mattis and Alex Rittman. Stick Snakes Hick Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety. And don't forget to tell us what you think at podcasts@Variety.com.